Hey guys, welcome to exercise 2 for Adobe Illustrator. Today what we're going to be doing is taking a look at the pen tool and the Pathfinder tool in Adobe Illustrator. So for this project, this is sort of just a kind of a follow along type deal. I find this is probably the best way of sort of showing you how the pen tool works and Pathfinder as well. So if you go on to the Blackboard folder for this week's exercise, exercise 2, you'll find there's a file in there labeled Pen and Pathfinder file. Go ahead and download that, open that in Illustrator, and this is what you'll see. It's basically two layers here. We've got one that's locked down with this, just a JPEG of this worksheet here. Leave that locked down. You can make a new layer if you need to, as many as you need to for this. And basically what you're going to be doing is going through and sort of learning how to construct basic shapes and combine shapes using Pen tool and Pathfinder. So what you can do is just follow along with this. So I've got my pen tool over here, and you can sort of follow along. There's some minimal written instructions, but what you're going to do to start out with is create two basic shapes that you're then going to use to examine how Pathfinder works. So for this first one, it's got a little tip here. If I hold down Shift, it's going to let me snap my point placement to exact verticals. So I'm going to get perfectly straight lines every single time. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to click, got my pen tool, I'm going to click once, place a point, hold down Shift, move to the next one, click once, and then holding down Shift before I click each time. And what I end up with is I don't need to hold Shift for this last one. You can see I'm getting the circle to close out this shape that I'm building. And what I end up with is my completed shape. Let me add a stroke to that so we can see it a little better. And this is what I've got. I've made myself a rectangle. I'm going to keep that off to the side, and I'm going to do the same thing with this circle over here. So what I'm going to do is read the instructions first, click and hold to place a point, then drag to the end of the arrow point to create a curve. So what I'm doing is I'm clicking and holding and swinging these arms out to the end of the arrow, letting go, continuing on to my next point. I'm going to click and hold, drag to the end of the arrow, and repeat the same process each time. And I'm going to do the same thing again on this one to close it out. I'm going to click and hold to close it, drag to the end of the arrow, let go. If I switch to my move tool here, you're going to see I've made myself a circle. Now, practically, an easier way to make these shapes would be just with our shape tools over here. I can quickly draw out a rectangle. I can quickly draw out a circle. If I hold down Shift, it's going to snap this so it stays perfectly round. I can hold down space to sort of move it before releasing the mouse button. Make sure I'm getting a size that works for me. So these up here, the manual way of creating these shapes, this one's very useful because it sort of shows you how clicking and dragging and swinging these arms out enacts gravity onto this curve, which is what allows us to bend and move it around and affect the shape of each corner, which would otherwise be square. Let me snap my type tool out here, or not my type tool, my pen tool, sorry. So we can modify these shapes as well, just like we did previously in our type exercise. I can remove some. I can switch to my my anchor point tool and click and reset these, or drag some of these arms around to modify the shape, just like we could always before. Same deal with these pre-made shapes. I can go through and modify any of these to suit my needs. Choose my direct select arrow, modify this. So you can see I did have just a normal old sphere. Now what I can do is, by removing that initial curve on there and playing around with this a bit, I've made myself a nice water drop or a teardrop, or you know, could be a drop of Kool-Aid or any other sort of like liquid that takes on this sort of form as it's falling. So you guys get the idea of how that works. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this is I'm going to make some of these shapes that you're seeing down here using Pathfinder. So let me just get my circle back here. These don't have to be super exact. You can make them larger if you need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Pathfinder to create some new shapes based off of shapes that I've already created. If you're looking for Pathfinder, I've got it set up right here, but if you go to Window and Pathfinder, that will pop it open. Sometimes it's under, if you're using a different version of Illustrator, I think it used to be under Object somewheres, and the options pretty much are the same. We've got 4 basic ones that we're going to be using for this class. We've got Unite, which, think of this as taking 2 different pieces of clay or Play-Doh and smushing them together. It makes them one shape. Minus front, the shape in the front, the shape on top acts like a cookie cutter. It's going to cut out whatever shape that cookie cutter is from the dough underneath, or the shape underneath. Intersect, it's going to leave you with only the portions of your 2 shapes that overlap one another. And exclude, it's going to leave you with only the portions of your 2 shapes that don't overlap one another. So let's take a look at these and see what they do. I'm going to put Pathfinder right here, and I'm just going to be making copies of these shapes. I've already got them here. I don't need to redraw these every time. So what I'm going to do is choose my rectangle. I'm going to hold down Option or Alt if you're on a PC. I'm just going to drag it into place, and you can sort of see how these shapes are going to come into play here based on this JPEG that's in the background. So I'm going to drop these 2 into place, and I need to make this arrangement of 2 shapes look like this one. This is one whole shape. So what are my options? Subtract, that's not going to do it for me. This looks like they're stuck together, so I'm going to check out Unite. I bet you that's the one that'll do it. And sure enough, I'm left with exactly what I was looking at in terms of my my background image there. So that one's all set. If you guys want to play with this a little more, you can play with the color, fill it if you want to with something, an interesting color to sort of break it away from the other ones. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so for the next one, same deal. I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, make a copy and drop it into place. Can't really see where that circle was going to be, so I'm going to move that out of the way temporarily. Drop a copy of my circle down in, and then move my rectangle back in. Okay, so I know that what I was looking for is creating sort of an archway or a bridge kind of shape. So I want to cut out that circular shape from my rectangle. So what that means is I'm going to need to use minus front. So I need to make sure that the shape that I want to act as a cookie cutter, the sphere, to be on top of my rectangle, which in this instance it is. So let me make a copy here so I can show you both instances of how this could turn out. So here's what would happen if the rectangle was in front. I'm going to choose both, hit minus front. I'm going to be left with it's basically a bowl from side on. So looking at it from the side, it's kind of just a bowl shape. Doesn't resemble what we're looking for here. So now I'm going to try it with the circle in front. And that reproduces exactly what I was looking for. So you can see how, depending on the arrangement, you'll get a different result every time. One of the ways you can go about rearranging things to get the proper shapes in front of where you want them to be is to choose the shape, and you can go to Object and Arrange, bring it to the front, send it to the back, or move it forward incrementally. And you can see here there's keyboard shortcuts. Easy way to remember it, it's just the bracket keys, but they're modified by the control or command key depending on which operating system you're using. So if I wanted this box to be in front, I'm going to hold down control, command, and use the bracket keys to either move it forwards or move it back in space. And you can enact that on either of the shapes. Okay, so our next one here, we've got, some sort of shape. If I look at it, it looks like it's part of the rectangle, but one end, two ends are rounded off, like the sphere was used in some way to modify this. So what I'm going to do is kind of look, and I really can't see where I'm going to be able to get in there and position this correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to temporarily lower the opacity on both of these shapes. So I'm going to select both, and up here at the top or off in a sidebar menu, what you're going to see is either listed on transparency or opacity. I'm going to, with both selected, lower the opacity. That's going to make these transparent so I can see through them to that graphic underneath, which will let me position these and get them kind of close to where they need to be. And then what I'm going to do is grab both again, take the opacity back up, and choose the option I'm looking for. In this case, that graphic underneath, it looks like I'm keeping just the overlap, so I'm going to choose intersect, and that reproduces the look that I need for this one. Okay, so for our final one, we make a couple more copies here, put them into place. You can kind of guess where this one's headed based on what we've been doing. Our last option here, exclude, is going to give us our final shape. Now, something unique about this one is this isn't one single shape like what we've produced previously. This is actually two shapes merged into a group. So if I were to select this and go to Object and Ungroup, it's going to break these two apart, and I have two different shapes here. So this is kind of a useful thing if you guys have a group of shapes or an arrangement of shapes that you kind of want to keep together in their current format. What you can do is select them, go to Object, Group, and that's going to lock them together so that way if you move one, the others are going to go with it, and you're not going to have to worry about things getting out of position or all screwy on you. Okay, so for this last part, this is a bit of creative problem solving for you guys. What I want you to do is try and recreate these shapes using Pathfinder. So think about it this way. what are the overall shapes used to create each of these. For instance, probably the one that stumps people most is this one here. It's a circle, but it's got these channels running through it. So think of this in terms of two different shapes. One is the circle, and the second is these channels, this negative space. So think about creating a circle, and then think about how you're going to create a shape to mimic these channels running through it. This might be, you know, 1, 2, 3 different thin rectangles that are then, you know, united together to create one shape, placed over top of a circle, and then used as, you know, a cookie cutter to knock that out. So a little bit of creative problem solving, a little bit of work with using curves and the pen tool to create some of these winding shapes. So play around with it, have some fun. It's going to be a little frustrating, but this is where you really want to take the time to put in the work to understand how this tool works, because this is the meat of Illustrator, and if you're looking to go in the field of graphics design, this is one of your go-to tools that you're gonna really want to become familiar with. And generally, once people do, they find Illustrator to be a lot of fun. So, all right, guys, have fun.